I want to talk to you about acoustic blankets for podcasting. And of course, when you think about acoustic blankets, you are thinking about directly or indirectly about audio quality, audio comfort, and most importantly, for your listener experience. You want to really improve your listener experience. Okay. So here are the general considerations I want you to think about. When you think about acoustic blankets, of course, you're thinking about audio quality, but you're also thinking about reverb. I mean, reverb is really important. I mean, we often do not notice it, but the reverberation of sound gives us hugely important sensory clues about our environment. So when we walk into an auditorium or a closet, hear a bird call in the woods or the sound of thunder, reverb provides essential contributions to our sense of the size of a room, or let's say the distance of a lightning strike. Okay, so that's an important element to think about when it comes to reverb. So, I mean, simply put, reverb is sound reflecting off of a surface or surfaces, also known as an echo. So, when there is a prominent hard surface to bounce off, you may get the classic hello, hello, distinct type of echo. But most environments actually are more convoluted, with a variety of surfaces producing numerous reflections in such quick successions that they become indistinguishable, blending into one another. Okay, and this happens a lot, especially if you are actually podcasting from, let's say, a very tight environment. So simply put, actually, what happens here is that you are able to have a pretty varied results. The result is actually a diffuse tail lingering after an initial sound, and the time it takes to that tail to die actually tells our brains how large of a space we are in or how far we are from the source, right? So that's an important element. So shorter tails mean smaller spaces, closer sounds, and longer tails are kind of equal to larger spaces, more distant sounds. So that's a difference actually if you are podcasting from your let's say your basement versus in your office, right? And the echo is different. The reverb also is different. Very important to think about. Now, I have an entire show to actually focus on reverb, so you might want to go and watch that show if you're interested in reverb in general. But one thing for sure, that when you think about reverb in your room, for instance, most of the rooms that we actually recording tend to have close, short reflections that will be more or less pronounced depending on the dimensions and how hard surfaces are, right? So that this is actually important, especially if you are trying to introduce acoustic treatment. So one thing for sure, when you have hard surfaces, this can lead to problems in the editing or mixing phases of your podcast because the reflections happen almost simultaneously with your voice getting baked into the recording in the first place. And this makes them difficult to separate via processing. So the takeaway here is simple. Keep them from happening in the first place. And I'll share with you a lot of ways to actually keep them from happening in the first place. So if you want to mitigate those effects, you want to really understand first reflection points. First reflection points in your room are actually the surfaces directly around your recording position. And the thing is, your recording position can be on the floor, can be the ceiling, can be the walls. And so that recording position actually reflects the sound of your voice back to you. So you have an element of a reflection, action reaction there. And those reflection points are easy to identify from your speaking position. Imagine that each of the surrounding surfaces is actually a mirror. Looking into your imaginary mirrors, estimate where you would see the mic on the floor, walls, and ceiling. So those are actually your first reflection points, okay? And they're not really that complicated to imagine, especially if you are used to it, okay? Now, there are several approaches you can take to keep them out of your recording. Start by trying actually a dynamic microphone instead of a condenser, if you have the option, because those are typically more directional and less sensitive to the peripheral environments. And the peripheral environments actually plays an important role when it comes to actually mitigating the impact of reverb, okay? Now, if you record in the same space week after week, it may be worth buying or building acoustic treatment to hang on the walls and incorporate into the aesthetic of the room. So if your setup is more mobile, you might consider a vocal booth box, and this is kind of important. I'll speak about booth box later on. So when I think about acoustic blankets for podcasting, how do you think about acoustic treatment? Acoustic treatment in the first place. Now, the most common principles of acoustic treatment are actually, you have three of them. You have absorption, diffusion, and soundproofing. So think of it as ADS: absorption, diffusing, and soundproofing. And so I'll talk about all of those later on, so you have a clear idea. I want to talk about A and D first: absorption and diffusion. So absorption is actually the most common approach to acoustic treatment, and is also especially effective at mitigating reflections. So when absorptive material is placed between a sound source and a reflective surface like a wall, sound must travel through it to reach the wall, and then the reflection must travel back through to reach your ear or a microphone. By that point, what happens here is that most of the sonic energy, especially in higher frequencies, has been discharged, and there will be little to no discernible reflection, which will really result in a less live or more dead sounding room. Okay, and this is great to really think about. And diffusion actually occurs when a sound meets a variety of surfaces of different depths and or angles, and each of these surfaces produces reflections at different speeds and angles, essentially breaking up and scattering what would otherwise be a more distinct reflection from fewer and larger surfaces. So while acoustic absorbers and diffusers are a mainstay of recording studios, the same principles are actually at work in your home. As a matter of fact, let me give you an example. Think about the last time you moved into a new house or apartment. On move-in day, the empty space probably had a prominent reverb or even distinct echoes present, right? What about today? Because once you move in all your stuff, the sound they used to reverberate or echo were absorbed and diffused to some degree by furniture, rugs, books, and blankets. So the takeaway here is that you don't necessarily have to spend a ton of time and resources on professional acoustic treatment. Merely choosing the right room in your home or office, or even adding furniture and rugs to your available space, can be actually a significant step toward a better sounding recording. And again, you're not doing all of these things for yourself, though. You're doing it for yourself, but you're also doing it for your listeners. It's all about thinking about listeners, okay? If you want to improve your your listener experience, then having this thinking, let's say strategically about absorption and diffusion is actually really good, especially in the long run. So that's really an important step to think about. Now, I want to talk to you about soundproofing. Remember, I said it to you a little earlier that you have ADS: absorption, diffusion, and soundproofing. Now, soundproofing actually, it's not about you trying to really have a home studio. You're not really trying to spend like thousands of dollars and having the right equipment to actually soundproof. No, you can actually do things a lot more easily. Now, soundproofing is often incorrectly used as a catch-all term for this concept, but in reality, it's actually the least common and most expensive approach. So where absorption and diffusion are concerned with deadening and disrupting reflections inside a room, soundproofing is actually concerned with keeping outside noises from getting in and vice versa. So you are basically isolating, you're actually restricting the impact of outside and inside noise through like in terms of your podcast, okay? So a truly soundproofed room requires a structural renovation to achieve true isolation from the external environment, in addition to interior treatment for reflection. So this is an important element to think about. Now, is this overkill for the average podcast? Absolutely, especially if your listeners don't really care about this level of sophistication. Because remember, whether you're doing absorption, you're doing diffusion, or you're doing soundproofing, there has to be a direct impact on the listener experience, because the listener is actually your end goal here. Of course, you want to build a community. You want to really establish your thought leadership. That's for sure. But if nobody's listening to your shows, that's really crazy, because you're just wasting your time and wasting a lot of possibilities. So it's an important element to think with the end user in mind, and the end user here is your favorite listener. And the more loyal the listener is, the better, because that means you have found a listener who really understands the kind of show you're trying to run, who really likes you, likes the production you have, likes the way you talk, likes the kind of topics you cover. So that's kind of cool. I mean, this is where you actually have a real community, a community that's really worthy of monetization for you, especially if you are trying to scale your show down the road. So that's an important element to think about. Let me give you a few pro tips here. I want to first talk to you about the DIY acoustic treatment tips. The thing is that you have a lot of ways to actually do acoustic treatment for your podcast. But the whole idea here is that you do not want to outsource this operation to a third party. Otherwise, this will cost you crazy, right? I mean, if you are a newbie in podcasting, you can do things yourself. There are many prefabricated acoustic treatment options available on the market. But if you are on a budget, this can be sometimes cost prohibitive. Additionally, your podcast may not always have you in a controlled studio environment, and you may need a more mobile setup. And so the good news is that there are plenty of DIY options to suit your needs. Let me give you a few possibilities here. You first have a stationary interior treatment. So if you record in the same environment week after week after week after week, it's not a bad idea to consider acoustic paneling for the walls and or ceiling of your space. So the paneling is great because it really isolates not only the inside but also the outside. And your choice of in-room treatment material should actually consider thickness. I mean, the thicker the material, the more absorptive power across all frequencies, and that's what you want. You do not want to have a light material. You want to have a very thick one. Okay, so that's an important element to think about. So a standard size of like 4x2 and 2-inch thick, built around conventional fiberglass or mineral wool construction as insulation panels is really good. And you also have you can actually build simple frames around those panels using cheap pine lumber from your favorite hardware store, and finish them off by wrapping them with any breathable of fabric of your choosing. Remember, thinner fabric is better in this particular case, okay? And a good gauge of fabric thickness is to hold the fabric in your hand and blow. If you can feel your breath, it's good. Sound is actually moving air, so if you wanted to move through the fabric into the absorbent material, this is actually the way it should actually have. Another option is to purchase used materials locally. And Oralex foam is a common sound solution and may be readily available in your areas. On the absorptive front, be aware that foam panels are less dense and therefore less absorptive, particularly in the lower mid-range and bass frequencies. So this is an important element to think about, especially in the long run. But the cheapest option for treating your room is simply to fill it with stuff. That's all. This is a legitimate approach, especially for interview-style podcast where a comfortable environment is essential, or if you're a solo podcaster and you don't mind a little curated clutter. Furniture, rugs, curtains, full bookshelves, and decor all come with their own absorptive and diffusive character that can really contribute significantly to reducing reflections. And you may find that you will still want to add some strategically placed acoustic panels after the fact, but it's a significant first step. You can also think about mobile and temporary treatment. So it's kind of common in the film industry to use furniture, blankets, to dampen the sound on set. They are easy to roll up, carry with you, and to set up, tear down, and as needed. So lay them on floors, hard tables, or any horizontal reflective surface you may be dealing with. Use microphone stands with boom arms as makeshift curtain rods for this. Extend the mic stand as tall as it will go, then put the boom arm at a perpendicular angle and you want to center it so that it looks like a T. And drape or clamp the blankets on the book arm, and you've got a freestanding acoustic panel. And this is kind of cool. Now, of course, other types of heavy blanketing will work as well. Just remember that the thicker is better here. And so when placing freestanding blankets panels like this, your goal is still to set them up so that they block first reflections. Consider also your microphone position and placed between, you want to place treatment between, let's say, between the mic and your first reflection points. And try a few desperate takes and adjust the taste. You'll often find that closer to the mic will give you stronger absorption. So this is an important element to really think about, especially if you're thinking about having this sort of connection with your audience, right? If you have an audience and you really want to really establish this sort of a family relationship with your audience, then you have to then the mic treatment, the mic position actually is really important. But one thing for sure, you can also ask your audience to actually provide feedback on the sound quality, on the audio quality in general, and based on their feedback, you can actually adjust things on your end. Because the whole thing is sometimes when it comes to podcasting, it has to be a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. Of course, you're talking to an audience who is hopefully listening. But if you want to really improve things down the road, it's always good to use the community features in your podcast software tool to actually ask questions. As a matter of fact, if you are on YouTube, for instance, you can also use YouTube's features, community features, to learn more about how your audience thinks about your audio quality. You can also think about closets. Now, when you think about closet, should you go or not go with closets? Well, the thing is that a lot of folks get asked often about recording in walk-in closets and other small spaces, and those kinds of areas tend to be the quietest, that's for sure, most isolated option available in many homes, and there is certainly some value to that. And now there are a few more things to consider though. Small places tend to have a very immediate, very prominent reflections because the walls are so close to the sound source, your voice in this case. So when recording in a small space like a closet, you'll likely hear an unpleasant, boxy quality because the reflections happen so quickly so as to become part of the sound of your voice. This can sometimes be helped by, you guessed it, absorption. If you have a lot of clothes hung in the closet, it may provide enough sound absorption to offset the boxiness, but ultimately, you may need to consider a larger room. It's one of those things where you have to see again if your audience is pretty comfortable with the quality of the sound, okay? And please don't ask your guests to record an episode with you in the closet. Walk-in closets are only for solo podcasters only, okay? And this is an important element to think about. Now, the thing is when it comes to having acoustic blankets for podcasting, you got to really ask yourself how much you're willing to spend, because it's all about resources too. Of course, you're trying to really have a better listening experience for your audience. That's pretty comfortable. That's really good. But you got to have the resources to. You have to. The whole thing has to be a win-win for you and for your audience. Okay. So this is important. An important element to think about. If you have any question about this, let us know in the comment section, and I'll certainly get back to you. Or one of our team members will get back to you and really explain how to really go about acoustic blankets for your podcasting journey. And the cool thing is that as a result of modern recording technology, the barrier to entry for producing the podcast has never been lower. But this also means that the baseline for quality is higher, and you will need to give more attention to things like acoustic treatment if you want to rise above the noise, literally, okay? And if you have the resources to invest in treatment solutions before you start, great. If you don't, just think in terms of your possibilities and build into the quality of your production and environment as you grow. So this is actually the scalability approach. Always strive to do the best work with what you have, and always look for opportunities to improve. And you will never go wrong, especially in the long run. So in conclusion to this conversation, I spoke to you about acoustic blankets for podcasting. I give you the general considerations, a few tips here and there, and now the conclusion. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.